Steph said that it sounded like a whale. And
I would say it sounded like underwater moaning.
It was a very strange, screeching, metallic, grinding noise, pretty high pitch, about 5:30 in the morning, and woke me up.
That is so creepy.
It was either moaning or howling, like sort of this long ooh sound.
A machine that needed oil, metallic, brakes on a car, but extremely loud.
This was before you got here. Yeah.
Now, I have seen the YouTube videos and Facebook posts about people hearing these noises elsewhere in the world, but again, I've never really attributed it to that at all. I've just like, oh, it's got to be something the airport is doing. Like, it has to be, right? I'm a scientist. There's a rational explanation for this.
Oh gosh. Now that's creepy as huh?
If there's something going on in the airport at the airport that's causing this, and it is quite loud and waking people up, then there's actions that can be taken for that. If it's some other phenomenon, right. I think I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I'm not worried, just curious.
Same.
Meantime, a mystery gripping central Arizona. What caused the latest loud boom? Neighbors in Yavapai County reaching out wanting to know exactly what happened last night. Many in that area hearing the boom, while some noticed lights in the night sky. A sound similar to what happened on Sunday morning. According to the American Meteor Society, that boom was likely caused by a meteor.
They've had a bunch of people calling in wondering what is going on.
So another mysterious boom was first reported on Sunday. You're looking at the only video proof we have of this happening. What is that? Is that smoke?
I think it was the remnants. There you go.
Meteor. Okay.
That could be a remnants of a meteorite.
Okay.
A meteor coming in.
Russell Hoover capturing video that proves people weren't dreaming this morning when it started shaking.
My house started rattling, and for the first time ever, I started hearing pops in the attic.
Well, did you feel it? A loud boom rattling and shaking homes across Mobile County and into Mississippi. It happened around 10 o'clock this morning.
Not your typical morning across the Gulf Coast.
It was spooky because that's something we don't, that I've never experienced here in Mobile as long as I've been here, but it was real scary.
Alexander White says he was eating breakfast when things started to get a little weird.
All of a sudden, I felt the house start shaking, which are living around the corner, and I noticed that my garage door was shaking real.
This video is from Russell Hoover. He told me he heard a buildup and then all of the shaking. It wasn't just people who felt it. Technology also picked up on it. The University of South Alabama says their seismometer shows the shake.
It doesn't appear to be an earthquake. So maybe something else, something at the Earth's surface, maybe an explosion, maybe something in the atmosphere.
This boom just shook all the windows. There wasn't any airplane noise before it, and there wasn't any real other sounds around it. It was very weird.
We also checked with the Coast Guard Aviation Training Center in Mobile. They tell us they don't have the type of jets that would produce a sonic boom.
We're seeing more extreme weather events like this. Incidents of this sort are therefore becoming more frequent.
Area tell us they heard a loud and mysterious boom sometime last night. It was so loud that a lot of people actually called 911 about it.
This began about 2 years ago in this area. We would receive complaints for explosions. We'd go out, never find anything, no witnesses, nobody saw anything.
A growing number of residents have reported hearing in the past months. He might not be convinced had he not heard it himself.
I've heard it several times, yes.
Including during the most recent town board meeting.
Well, sitting at the town board meeting on Monday, all of a sudden there was a loud boom. Everybody just paused for a second and looked at the windows, and you think to yourself, my gosh, what was that?
Today, 7 News spoke to others in the neighborhood who agree.
I was laying in bed after school and work and hang out with some friends, watching some Netflix, and out of nowhere this like super loud boom happens and shakes the whole house.
And we heard this might not be the first time.
They've happened before, but they don't happen super often.
Scientists have a mystery on their hands. Signals from outer space are being detected. But what's causing the unusual sounds, and where exactly are they coming from?
We're talking 500 million light years away. Something big is happening, and scientists on Earth can detect it.
You sort of think about E.T. and stuff like that.
I can't think of a mystery that we've had this enticing in a long time.
Tim Paglione, a professor of physics and astronomy at CUNY York College, confirms a recent journal article that hones in on fast radio bursts, or RFBs, is causing a lot of buzz.
What we see observationally is there is a bright, very short burst, like milliseconds burst of radio emission from someplace, from something.
Paglione pinpoints their origin. In this case,
It's in this spiral arm, and that's the localized spot of the FRB.
what's most exciting about this signal from outer space is that it repeats itself every 16 days.
They used to be a one-off. There'd just be this burst and then you'd never see it again. And so that made it even more mysterious.
Scientists wondered if what they witnessed was even real, but picking up on the pattern changes that.
They were real. We could determine a lot better where they were.
Radio bursts repeating every 16 days were recently detected by an array of telescopes in Canada.
And those are the exciting ones because when they repeat, you can figure out where they are.
New Canadian telescope called CHIME near Penticton, BC, scientists have determined that radio bursts can repeat. Watching from York University, Paul Delaney.
The repeating part of it is what is really exciting, because now we stand a chance of figuring out what these things are.
And the latest stunning discovery, a rhythmic pattern.
To see fast radio bursts repeat is one thing. To see them arrive in rhythm is something else again.
Million light years away. This is the closest FRB ever detected. And it's just amazingly interesting. And I think one of the most interesting things is that, truthfully, there is no definitive reason as to why they're receiving these signals as of yet. But he gave us the most likely scenario.
But doesn't that make it all the more intriguing?
Yeah, of course.
Captivating,
It
right?
absolutely does.
It's a
So
perfect
much to
story for
learn.
you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Vanessa.
Now in the UK, bomb cyclone storm Dennis, now one of the most intense North Atlantic storms on record, triggered massive flooding in the UK. Riley Carlson is following this and more from London.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. Storm Dennis battered the North Atlantic over the weekend, and it is considered to be one of the strongest bomb cyclones ever. That's when an area of low pressure drops so significantly in about 24 hours that it causes hurricane-strength winds.
Hurricane-force winds on the shores west of Amsterdam were almost too much to bear for these beachgoers who struggled to remain standing. Those same winds causing havoc at airports. This commercial airliner aborted its landing just seconds before touching down at Birmingham Airport in the UK, the pilot making a nail-biting last-minute decision.
Yeah, so talk us through the impact here. I think locusts, for a lot of us, people think of the biblical plague and welcome back. Well, there's a humanitarian crisis unfolding in East Africa. Locusts in numbers they haven't been seen in 70 years. Fears they could spread right through the continent and, of course, endangering food supplies there as well.
But first, an ongoing plague of desert locusts is devastating crops in East Africa. The insects are the most dangerous of all migratory pests.
Invading legions of locusts are affecting dozens of countries in Africa and Asia. Massive swarms have been destroying farmland and threatening millions of lives. Even troops and planes have been mobilized in the Horn of Africa to fight the most serious plague in decades.
I want to bring attention to this. Take a look at these swarms of locusts. This here is in Ethiopia, just completely covering a lot of areas of Ethiopia and their crops.
آثار تقريبا مسافة كيلوين.
Swarms have spread through Kenya, Somalia, Tanzania, Eritrea and Djibouti. And on Tuesday, some crossed back into Uganda after having briefly entered South Sudan. Now, the invasion poses a serious threat to food security in a region where up to 25 million people are already struggling to get enough to eat after 3 years of drought, floods, and in South Sudan's case, at least, civil war.
Well, you have to imagine, first of all, how big a swarm of desert locusts can be. It looks like a cloud kind of on the horizon. So if you're a farmer that's depending on rainfall for your crop, and you see that cloud, you think it's rainfall until it moves closer to you, and it's millions and millions of insects. And just a single swarm of locusts, let's say the size of Paris, can eat the same amount of food in one day as half of France. Or if we do a similar analogous, that of the size of Rome can eat the same amount of food as everybody in Kenya. So the potential of these swarms is absolutely devastating.
There were a number of weather events that have triggered this migration. We believe they migrated from the Arab Peninsula and into Djibouti and then Somalia on the Horn of Africa. And that was caused by prolonged droughts in East Africa, and then followed by flooding, as well as a tropical cyclone making landfall in Somalia. So a number of weather events that have triggered this incredible migration.
We're looking at about 8 countries here in threat, all due to warmer climate. We've seen the most cyclones in the Indian Ocean this season, a record of 8. And that heavy rain has contributed to more of this locust growth.
We've noticed in the past 5 years an increase in the frequency of these cyclones off the Indian Ocean. So I think it goes to say, if this increase continues, and we know that cyclones trigger locust plagues, so if that increase does continue, then there's a chance, a very high probability, that the Horn of Africa, Arabia, and other countries will face desert locust upsurges and outbreaks like we have now.
Oh my God!
Crumbling under the force of flooding, this cafe at Hawick on the Scottish borders caved and collapsed. As Storm Ciara blew in, most of Britain was battered. The wild weather causing chaos from the coast to the country, as strong winds and heavy rains swept through. They've been here before in Mytholmroyd on the banks of the River Calder in West Yorkshire. This is the 3rd flood in 8 years.
Off the coast of Sussex, this rescue boat almost capsized trying to reach a surfer in distress. In eastern France, at least 11 people were hurt by falling trees or debris. Along the coast, winds clocked in at 140 kilometers an hour.
Weather like this is actually fairly common out in the Atlantic, and usually it disperses before it reaches the UK. However, in the case of Storm Ciara, this exceptional weather that we're experiencing is being caused by a low pressure system that's 4,000 miles wide and stretches from Florida to Scandinavia.
Whoa, yeah!
This BA flight abandoned its landing as winds whipped round the runway.
Oh, touch and go, touch and go!
At Dover, ferries stopped running. The sea's too rough for crossings. With winds reaching speeds of 97 miles an hour, it was a struggle to stay standing.
Basically, for me, it's like this is a lesson. Mother Nature is teaching us a lesson with the wind and the waves. You know.
The weather bad enough to keep the Queen from attending her regular Sunday church service.
It developed as a low over eastern America, and then it has just whistled away eastwards across the Atlantic, driven by a really strong jet stream. I think it was something like 265 mile an hour jet stream, so it's unusually strong. And behind Storm Ciara, there's much colder air as well.
Flights that weren't cancelled struggled to land at London's Heathrow Airport because of intense wind gusts. Wind speeds in Iceland clocked in at a staggering 160 miles an hour. Across the UK, heavy rain swept away cars and flooded dozens of towns, while intense waves battered the coast. Nearly 400 flood warnings are still in effect for today. In some places, more than a month's worth of rain fell in 24 hours. States of emergency have been declared across the country as
The greatest concern is for the town of Tenbury Wells. Volunteers with lifeboats were helping the fire and rescue service to get everyone out safely, as houses along the banks of the Thame very quickly became uninhabitable. Storm Dennis brought a month's worth of rain in just 48 hours, and a record number of flood warnings were in place right across England. People in riverside communities were helpless as their homes and livelihoods were destroyed.
Nearby Pontypool, the River Taff has burst its banks, submerging vehicles and flooding.
Top-tier football matches in Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands and England were called off. But it wasn't all bad news. Powerful tailwinds helped a British Airways plane set a record for the fastest flight by a conventional airliner from New York to London.
This flight struggled to land at Heathrow, while hundreds of others were cancelled due to high winds.
Is he going to go around? Oh my God, look at it!
It comes barely a week after Storm Ciara also caused disruption to transport, flooded homes and left thousands without electricity. Meanwhile, France's northern coast was also hit by the storm. Clouds of foam struck this village in the Finistère region in Brittany, where winds reached over 100 kilometers per hour.
We're seeing more extreme weather events like this. Incidents of this sort are therefore becoming more frequent.